Welcome back, my subscribers. Today we're talking about macro photography, macro lenses, and how to get macro styled shots on a budget. Let's talk about it. One of the reasons I even got into photography in the first place was my love for macro photography. Looking into the small details, those patterns, textures, things that we don't really see, we're not used to seeing with our normal vision. So one thing to get out of the way is, if you have the extra money to get a dedicated macro lens, I recommend just go for it. There's a lot of options nowadays for Sony and for other systems. When I started, I've been with Sony for so long, there wasn't always a variety of options for macro lenses. So you had either the most expensive one, the Sony G 90mm f2.8, which is an absolutely awesome lens, or the Sigma variants that have still, that one still had a lot of room to improve. I remember using the 70 and it wasn't my favorite, but now we have the 105 and I think that one's definitely caught up a lot more. But the point is, if you have the funding for a dedicated one, just go ahead and try that out if it's important to the work that you do. But if you're someone like me, that's one of the reasons I got rid of my dedicated macro lens. It's not a lens that I actually use a lot. Every now and then I get the gas and I really want to add a dedicated macro to my collection. So that's yet to be seen, because then I'd have more options than I did in the beginning. A lot more budget friendly. Some are just manual focused and they're still amazing. But for today's video, I want to talk about how we can get similar shots, because it's not quite 100% one-to-one macro, but we can get pretty close by using what we call extension tubes. I know you've probably seen other videos, but just a quick crash course on extension tubes for those of you who aren't familiar. The way a dedicated macro lens works is by allowing the focus elements and the lenses to move in a way that allows you to focus on a close subject. But when we don't have that feature in a lens, the workaround to do that is by getting the lens itself and pushing it further away from the camera sensor. By doing that, it's similar to when you take off glasses or a magnifying glass and you're going like this. You'll notice that the image gets bigger. You get a little closer to it. So that's the same idea. When you're adding extension tubes, you're essentially adding more space between the lens and the camera sensor. So by doing that, you're going to increase your minimum focus distance. Of course, the downside to that is you're going to chop off your other focus areas. So normal focusing and down to infinity. You will definitely not be able to do that when you have extension tubes, because you're cutting down on that capability. If you're even thinking about extension tubes, it's because you're going to take macro style photos. So let me show you really quick how those look. Since I started looking at options for extension tubes, I noticed there are tons of them, so many. Some of them are dummy adapters, which means they don't allow autofocus to translate over. Others are autofocus capable. And then from those two groups, the build quality falls all over the place. So it could be plasticky, it could be too fragile. So it is kind of hard to find the right extension tubes. But luckily, I watched a couple of videos and a lot of people are recommending these. So I said, what the heck, I'm gonna try it out. They're $20 to $30. So when you buy it through Amazon, it's not a big deal. You could just return it if it doesn't work. So trial and error. In this scenario, I have gotten the Neewer macro extension tubes. This is a set that comes with two. It's a 10mm and a 16mm. The reason they come with two is to give you the option, how much magnification do you want? I combine them both just to get the maximum. So I'm not gonna get into the technical details because I don't understand them, the math of what your capability is. All I know is if you use both, that's as closest as you can get. So you're getting the maximum macro capability. So in this example, there is a benefit to using the extension tubes if they work, and we're gonna test that out. If they work, that means I could put any lens any Sony lens, Sigma lens, Tamron lens, whatever, whoever made the lens, I can put it on to these extension tubes and potentially get a macro style shot. So for this example, thinking that I need versatility, I've chosen to use my Rokinon Samyang 35 to 150 to f2 to 2.8. So if you've seen my other videos, you'll know I'm raving a lot about this lens. It's my all-in-one. It's my favorite zoom lens so far. It has not let me down. I mean, I'll keep using it, and I'll let you know if I see anything weird, but I think it'd be perfect for this test because I'm gonna be able to have that huge focus range, perspective focal length range. So the cool thing about that is I could try to see where I can get the best magnification, whether it's gonna be at 150 or 135. I'm gonna try to get those telephoto lengths in there because that's gonna allow me to be further away from my subject, but still get that magnified image. And overall, this lens does also have a very good minimum focus range. So if you pair a good minimum focus range lens with extension tubes, you will probably get the best results possible. So like I said, if I would have had the 70 to 200, I could have used that. I could use a prime lens, like a 50-1.4, 35-1.4, whatever it is. That is the benefit of using extension tubes. You can pick the lens of choice. A downside is they are sometimes fragile. These feel pretty solid. I think they're metal, but I'm still not gonna trust to put all the weight on these extension tubes. So I'm definitely going to hold it with both hands because I don't want to stress the mounts. So keep that in mind. And that would be the same if I'm mounting it on a tripod. I don't think I would be comfortable mounting the tripod on the camera and putting all this weight on these extension tubes. I just don't trust it. So I'm definitely going to go handheld. I know a lot of people advise against that with macro photography, but this is a test. I want to see if I could just do it on the run because potentially I could use this at wedding for getting ring shots or run and gun, you know, different type of product photography. I could just do it. For today's test, the other thing is I'm not going to set up any lighting. I have pretty good diffused lighting on this side. I'm going to open up the window and kind of direct it downward. Our test subject is going to be this awesome watch. This is a 1958 Bulova 23 jewel. I'll show it to you when we're doing macro shots. It's a very small watch. I mean, back then this was large, but I really like this watch for a couple of reasons. One, it's a historic piece because it's 1958. Two, it has a lot of neat details that doing a macro style shot will make it shine. So the dial is pressed in kind of, it has a guilloche pattern with a star, kind of like lines going all over the place, radial lines. And the guilloche dial has numerals placed above it. So we're gonna get a nice a nice contrast of textures and a nice contrast of elements at different heights, including the writing with the ink on the dial itself. The other neat thing is it has a very cool boxed acrylic crystal, which is surrounded by a bezel that is it's sort of like a crown point, 1 per hour. So there's a lot of cool elements to photograph. And when you're doing macro photography or product photography, you want to make sure that you are paying attention to the little details of the subject. So knowing this watch well, I know what I'm gonna want to photograph for. So with that in mind, I'm gonna put this, my backdrop is going to be a leather ottoman, nothing special. I literally put my feet on this thing, but I like it because it's a dark brown and this is going to stand out since it's a light brown, it's a tan. So I'm gonna put it on there and let's see how it works. I've tried it out quickly when I got it out of the box with the Rokinon Samyang 135. I was pleasantly surprised. I did do the handheld and everything, but this time I want to do it a little bit more serious. So let's move over to the macro shot. Again, this is nothing fancy. If you want to watch my other video, I did make a video about how shortcut tips of how to do macro photography on the spot, easy one light setup. So if you want to see that, go ahead and watch that. I will make an updated version because my perspective and style has changed, kind of like how I'm doing this running gun stuff. Or if you're out and about and you don't have all these big lights and stuff to set up. So I'll talk about that later. Let's do this. So here I've got my ottoman. Here's my watch. My idea is just to shoot it straight on from this direction. And look, that looks pretty funky, huh, with the extension tubes. And I'm gonna use this window shading blinds to direct the light downward onto the watch. So let's see how that would look. It's really bright outside, so you could see I'm getting a lot of light. It's actually overexposed. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and test it out and I'll report back on my findings. And we're back. So I did a quick test. Like I said, used the blinds, directional lighting. I am actually fairly impressed. Remembering how the one-to-one look of my dedicated macro results looked, I think it's fairly close. I mean, it's not a one-to-one. I think this is closer to 0.6. I can't remember what the technical numbers were, but I think it got me close enough to where I could definitely just crop in a little bit more and get the image I was looking for. Now, what did surprise me, I want to point out, since I said I was going to use 35 to 150, I tested it at 35. I literally had to have this thing up against the glass. So that was not practical. As is with macro lenses, you usually want them to be more in the telephoto, the medium telephoto range, just to give you that distance between your subject. So same thing with 50, slightly further back. 70 was okay, maybe an inch or two away from the lens. I basically used this adapter with the lens at 135 and 150 the rest of the time. I was just getting the best results at the further telephoto lengths, and I actually liked the working distance. I think at 150 millimeter, I was close to a foot and a half away, which is close to the standard that most one-to-one lenses will work at. So that was good to see. So good, comfortable distance, full autofocus and metering with this adapter, which is impressive for being $20 to $30. I didn't have any autofocus issues at all. And to test it even more, I put it into video mode, and it was able to work with video mode. It was capturing the watch. If I wasn't within the range for focus, I just had to put it closer and it would capture it right away. So I could see this being used for products, showcasing them, and then you go into Super 35, you get even closer. So you definitely are getting a macro styled shot if you do a Super 35 in video. Or in photography, you just zoom in, or I mean crop in a little bit. So very impressive. I shot it at, I should have put it at 4K, but I was on my previous settings at 120p, so I'll be able to at least slow the shots down for you. But wow, the watch filled the frame at 150 millimeters with these extension tubes, something I would not have been able to do without those extension tubes or without a dedicated macro. So recorded video and took pictures at those focal lengths, and it kept the focus the whole time. I mean, I'm gonna keep using it. Let's check out the footage and the photo samples, and I'll leave you with that. I'll be back testing it with different lenses, but in the meantime, check the images and the sample video. Let me know what you think. I think, in my opinion, it was pretty impressive. I'd like to test it more. Thanks a lot. Stick around.